All right. Well, today on Just Engage University, I have Nicole Rule from The Greatest Worth. How are you?
Hello, good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being on. I'm really excited to have you because I just found you on Instagram like a month ago, and obviously the universe aligns us for a reason.
Yes.
And I've been wanting someone to come onto the episode to talk to all of my newly engaged couples around just financial stability and how important it is to have all those ducks in a row before
Yes.
even getting married. And after listening to you and Katie on your podcast and some interviews that you've had with some amazing guests, I thought, why not just have you on and have you share your story on how you created this podcast and what it is that you actually do with your clients?
Yes, that would be great. So I obviously created Greatest Worth. It happened. It's kind of been like a decade-long process, which things usually are. But about 9 years ago, I found myself really in a tough place, pretty stuck financially and strapped. And I just had my second baby and I was looking to go back to work. And I realized that I was just kind of crunching numbers. Honestly, I hadn't paid attention to our budget or our money before that. I kind of gave it all to my husband and he did everything. And as I was crunching numbers, I realized that I didn't have any options. Like I had to go back to my job 40 hours a week. I was hoping I could do maybe like 2 days a week and stay home with the kids some, but none of that was options. And honestly, on top of that, we were overspending every month. And so it was just like this horrible, horrible realization. And something for sure I want to encourage your listeners to do is to kind of have these conversations beforehand and knowing what your money situation is before you get to this place of kind of desperation and frustration will basically avoid it, right? And like we were talking about earlier, I had a guest on my podcast who she is my age now, which is she's 40. She's about to be 40. And when she was in her 20s, she really wanted to have kids, but she was a teacher and she knew she wouldn't be able to stay home with her children unless they like paid off their mortgage. And so they created this crazy, amazing goal and they paid off their mortgage in their 20s. I think she had her oldest when she was 30 and she got to stay home with them and she stayed home with her kids and now she's teaching again. But it's just something that will create all sorts of freedom in your life. So that's kind of been my goal ever since, so I guess I should digress. Since I found out like we were $100,000 in debt when I was crunching all the numbers and we basically went into hardcore budgeting mode. I finally had this why, which was to kind of be home with my family and have more freedom, to be honest with you. I knew I wanted to start a business someday and I had no freedom at that point. So we went pretty hardcore. We paid off that $100,000 in about a little over 2 years.
Wow.
And from that point, just kind of have created spaces to like coach my friends. That's kind of how it started. They were like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? And so then I started coaching friends and, had a little course that I put together for people at my church, stuff like that. And then it just kind of morphed into this business, which I love today. And I've created kind of my own signature process. I'm a personal development junkie. And so it's got a lot of those aspects in it. I honestly feel like my process is not just for money. You can use it for any sort of goal that you have in your life. And so I'm going to kind of talk to your clients today about how you can even use this process just specifically for a wedding budget, like make it real small and real specific.
I love that. So I want to go back to a couple of the things you said at the beginning. So you found out when you were having your second baby that you guys were in debt. So this is something that you didn't even do beforehand. And you said your husband took care of a lot of the things, which I think a lot of listeners can say the same thing. I have listeners who are newly engaged. I have listeners who are already married, maybe getting married for the second time. And then I also have a lot of people in the wedding industry listening too, that we deal with couples who are about to make a huge investment in their life. Mm-hmm. And I would say 9 out of 10 haven't had a sit down to know where they are individually with their life and their financial stability, and then what they're going to do as a goal together. Yeah. So you figured that out after having a child and having your second child and wanting to stay home and not go back to work. And the fact that you paid off $100,000 in 2 years is insane. That's amazing.
It was insane. Yeah.
I mean, and so, I want to kind of get our listeners and my clients and couples to start this beforehand so they don't get there.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of the times there's never been a situation where I've been in where everyone's debt free, where they don't have, they're not paying for anything. And what I don't like to see is that couples get into debt because they are getting married and they want to have this amazing day and process of events leading up to that day. And it puts them in a situation where they can't do things for the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
They can't travel. They can't, maybe a person wants to start a business. Maybe they want to have children right away. So there's so many little things that I feel they can learn and be educated on beforehand. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that and how your process and your method can really help my listeners and newly engaged couples.
Yeah. So I think the thing with me is like, I honestly knew there was debt, but most of it was student loans. And people nowadays, the like common language around student loans is that it's good debt and that it's okay to have and to just carry it for a really long time. And that's the like norm. And even I don't want to bash financial planners. I'm not a financial planner, but that is often what they'll tell you, because they'll say the interest rate is so low that you should just continue to pay the minimum payments on your student debt, and then you should use your money to invest. That's what most investment people will tell you. But what that doesn't take into account is like how you're living your life now and what that actually feels like. So what does it feel like to have, I mean, most of our debt was student loan debt. We both had undergrad and graduate degree loans, and it was just sitting there and it was suffocating us. It was taking away any sort of freedom that we could have in our life. And so we decided to pay those off. And so I think most people who are probably your clients, I don't know where they are at, but I think most people at this day and age are getting married like after college. And so you kind of know whether or not you have student loan debts, and you kind of know how much your payments are going to, you're probably already paying those monthly payments. And so to just kind of be aware of those and knowing, and then, what happens is we all get a car, once we get a job, then we have like a car loan on top of that. And that's another thing that I never learned, is that it's actually possible to not have a car loan and like to buy a car that is within your, range of being able to pay cash for. And that might not be the car of your dreams right away. It certainly wasn't for us, but there's so many possibilities out there that I feel like aren't talked about, if that makes any sense. So a lot of money is just kind of being willing to not do what everyone else is doing. And that can be hard. Probably in the wedding industry, that can be really hard too, because it feels like you want this amazing day and you want it to feel a certain way and be a certain way. And that often has a price tag attached to it. And so one of the things we'll talk about is how to actually create a budget around like your vision for your wedding day, because that will 100% set you up to be in a different space than if you go into marriage, right, with a $20,000 marriage loan. I don't even know. I guess people would put it on credit cards or how they would do that. Yeah.
And a lot of the times, here's what happens in for most couples. Again, it's not every couple, but the journey from being in a relationship to getting engaged, they forget the season of engagement, and they go from I just got a ring to I'm going to go plan a wedding. Yeah. And so what happens is, of course, most couples are working. Yes, most of them have finished school. They may live together already. They have car notes, but they're not talking about, okay, what can we spend just in general on life? Yeah. On our everyday, like going to the movies, going to take a vacation a year. They're not even talking about that. And then they're jumping into, hey, I want to plan this amazing wedding for, 150 of our closest friends. And they don't really know how much that's going to cost them because there's no real price tag. Right. And so they're just skipping this whole season of education.
Okay.
Which is where I try to bring my wedding experts and then experts in other fields of what they should be learning about. Yeah. And so what they end up doing is they get lost in the planning a day, instead of saying, you know what, let's be engaged. Let's be excited about this. Let's talk about our next 2 to 5 year plan.
Yeah.
Let's see what we want to do, at home, what our plans are for, do we want to travel? What does our work life look like? Are we going to stay in these, jobs that we're in now? Do they both even have jobs? So they're not even looking at that. And I think that would help them understand how to create a proper wedding budget.
Yes.
After they realize, okay, what's my next 2 to 5 year plan? Or what's just like my next 1 to 3 year plan? We don't even have to do 2 to 5.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't thinking of that. So
yeah.
then I feel like that gives them the why.
Yeah.
Then they're like, okay, because I'm going to do this in a year to 2, 3, and this is the kind of money that, we can spend, then we're going to have this type of wedding versus let's just go all out and do this amazing wedding. And then we'll figure it out after we get married. That's where the problem starts. And that's where the stress begins. And that's where, a lot of times that's statistics. Most marriages end because of financial irresponsibility. So no one wants to talk about it up front, but you can. And it also creates a clearer vision and lays a foundation for what you both want.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, let's just talk about the vision then, because I have like a 5-step process that I teach people. And what I wanted to share mostly with your clients was step 3, which is how to create a vision. I think that visioning, just like you said, is so important. And honestly, for engaged people, this is usually a really fun thing to do. This is not a stressful thing. It'll really connect you. And even with my married couples, this is something that, if one couple is really interested in getting into the money and the budget, and then one part of the couple is not, this is something that often will connect them and get them back together on the same page so that then they can talk about money. Because the first 3 steps of my process literally have nothing to do with money and budgeting. It's all about like creating a foundation for who you are, what you want, what you value, and then like where you want to go. And that's literally the whole first part. And then you create a budget based on all of those things. So creating a vision, what I tell people, and what I think I would tell your married people, is to like keep it smaller, because I usually tell my married couples to like dream 10 years into the future. And that might feel kind of crazy to, you know, like young 20-year-olds. And so I think your idea of like a 1 year or a 3 year, that will probably feel really fun and exciting to think about what you can do within 3 years, say. So what you do is literally you just vision. So you just, no holds barred. There's no restrictions. Often when we're visioning, like what we do is we put our everyday life restrictions on our 3 year from now self. And that doesn't allow for like, you know, crazy things to happen, right? Or like amazing, impossible dreams to happen. And I am like proof that that can happen, that in 2 years, my life was completely and drastically different. And so, and that was because I created a vision and I knew where I wanted to go, right? And so I tell people the vision is actually like the destination on your map. So you've got this map of your life, your vision is your destination. And then I have people create values for their life. So things that, they're usually like one word. I wasn't going to go too much into this today. This is actually step 2. But this would probably be a fun step for your clients too, where literally you say like, what do we want our life to be about? Who do we want to be in the world? And so you think about the things that you value. Maybe you value adventure. Maybe you value travel. Maybe you value love or romance, whatever it is. And you list those out. And those values are kind of your, I call it like the GPS system. So it's like, what will guide you to get to your destination? And those values are what will guide your spending as well. And these are the kinds of like conversations and things we don't think about having with our significant other necessarily. They feel kind of, I don't know, they just feel so big, right? They feel, I don't know, I don't remember doing this kind of stuff with my husband beforehand. And then once we got married, we started doing like this kind of dreaming. It took us a while. But so anyway.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Okay, so I know people don't talk about this. It feels a little uncomfortable, but what I think once you do talk about it is it's actually like a really connecting and really beautiful process. So really just kind of say, where do we want to be in 3 years? What do we want our life to look like? Who do we want to be as people? What do we want to be doing for work? You know, where do we want to be living? Like all the things that a dream would entail. And you write that down, you know, maybe take 10 or 15 minutes and just like brainstorm, write that down. And then the second step of that process is to actually create goals. So what are some like 10 goals that if you achieve those would get you to that dream, right? So kind of breaking it down. And I usually tell people to write down money goals, but your clients might not be at that point, right? Like if they haven't talked about their money or they haven't done any of that yet. So, but what comes up often when you're visioning is you start to see like, oh, money is a part of this process. Like whether or not we have a lot or don't have a lot right now, like what you start to see is like, if you had some money or you could put it towards that dream, right? Like, or if you paid off your student loans and had $500 more a month, you could use that to fund your vacation to Japan or whatever you wanted to do as part of your dream. So money starts to kind of come into the picture organically rather than being forced. And so that's kind of why this is a fun conversation to have. So creating 10 goals, then you break it down even further and you pick one of those goals. And when I'm working with people, it's usually a money goal, like I said. So we've kind of got these 10 money goals, and then you break it down more and you say, okay, well, the one thing that we could do right now that we could actually achieve in the next, you know, we could start taking action on immediately is to pay off our $1,000 credit card. Like we have this credit card, it's the smallest credit card, and we could achieve that fairly easily. How could we achieve that? And then you start making action steps. Well, probably need to create a budget, probably need to start tracking our spending to see where all of our money is going so that we can put all the extra towards this credit card. And what people start to see when you have this beautiful vision in place is that a budget isn't restricting. It's not something to like resent or be angry about. Right? It's something that is actually just a tool that you're using to get to that amazing dream that you created with each other. So this is often the step that I'll tell couples to do first, even though it's step 3 of my process, because it is so connecting and will get kind of the conversation started about money.
So one of the things you said, and money is hard to talk about, I think, in general, no matter if it's business or relationships, because we think of it as, I guess society just put it as everything revolves around money. But what you're doing is that step to create, excuse me, your step to create the vision, to understand the end game, the goal. And then they start to realize, okay, yes, it's fun. And then I don't think a lot of people hold themselves accountable.
Yeah.
And some people just don't like to take care of that. It's not in their personality. So these are also things that I talk about, that as a partnership, you're going to find who's better at some things and who's better at the other. And you can give that, I don't know, you can give that to your partner to take care of, not to say, hey, you do it, take care of it, and then just let me know, to hold you accountable. And I think this is where you find that step, is doing that. And then you're going to have to, I don't want to use the wrong word, but you're going to have to, I guess, make some sacrifices or make some changes in your life to get you to those goals quicker. And I think that's also hard, because no one wants to talk about that, especially when you just got engaged. You're thinking, okay, I want to have fun. I want to have an engagement party. I want to make sure we have fun bachelorette parties. But those are the things that later on you can say, you know, maybe I don't need to be traveling before this huge wedding. Maybe I don't need to spend another $2,000 here, because those are just one, it's a small piece of the puzzle for the bigger picture. And I don't think people realize that. And what they end up doing is going, I should have not done that. Or I wish somebody would have told me, or I wish I would have had the conversation knowing that we did want to travel the first 2 years of our marriage, because year 3, we want to have kids, and we know when we have kids, we're not going to be able to travel. Or, you know what, I do want to start my own business in the next 3 years. So I like that you have that step. I like that you make it fun, because money doesn't sound like fun to most people.
I know.
And I tell couples all the time, it's okay to have a long engagement. That's the point. Like, don't rush into something that you're not going to be able to A, afford, and B, that you're not going to be happy in. Nobody wants to get married and have this beautiful $40,000 wedding, but not be able to buy a home or live in an apartment or have one car. You know, it's like having that designer bag, but you don't have any money in it. That's the same thing. Sure, I can go buy a Louis Vuitton bag. No offense to Louis Vuitton, but you know, that's not my goal. I rather have a $20 bag and, you know, thousands of dollars in my bank account.
Right.
So
exactly.
Those are the types of things that it's not that it's not fun. It's real life.
Yeah.
You're preparing yourself for that. And I think more couples should understand that it's okay to do that, to plan, lay the foundation, do the visioning. Then you're going to understand each other better as partners. You're going to know what the end game is. And then you're also going to know, okay, this is a more realistic timeline for us to get married.
Yeah.
So totally. I have couples looking at 2022.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's amazing.
End of 2021. And I'm okay with that because that works for them.
Yeah. Yeah. They know what they're getting into. Yeah. I like to call the sacrifices, I like to call them choices.
Okay. Thank you. I'm like, that sounds bad.
No, that's honestly what it is, right? Like everything, we always have a choice. And we like to sometimes think we're a victim to our situation, but I truly don't believe that that is the case ever. We always have a choice. Even like myself, when I went to college, I had a choice whether or not to go to the college where I needed student loans versus going to a college where I didn't need student loans. And for a long time, I was just upset because I was the one who had to get student loans, right? There's a very different perspective that you can take on things. So honestly, just look at it like a choice. You have a choice to travel now, or you have a choice to travel after you're married. And so you get to make that decision, and you get to base it on your vision and your values, right? Because that is what's really going to help you to be joyful about your choice. Because if you're making choices based on like who you are deep inside, your values and your vision, it's going to feel so much easier to say no to the one thing so that you can say yes to the other thing.
And I think couples in relationships don't realize too that those values change over the years. So your first 3 years, it's kind of like vision boarding. A lot of people don't do it. I just got into it a couple of years ago, but your vision board's different every year, you know? Totally. And sometimes every 6 months, you know, same thing with business. Like, you know, your goals for the first 6 months of the year could be different, you know, completely different for the next 6 months and so on and so forth. So I think this is also a really good practice exercise to do before getting married, because it's going to happen again in your marriage, and it's going to happen again when you have kids, or it's going to happen again when you buy a house. So you're preparing yourself to change your course, or change your visions, and then to change your lifestyle. I know for a while, my husband and I traveled probably for 2 years straight because we could. You know, the kids were at an age, we did trips with the kids, trips with our friends. But then when I started my own business full time, it had to stop. And people were like, wait, what's going on? Like, you can't go on vacation with us. You can't do this. And it's like, well, that's not our season right now.
Yeah, we're making choices.
Because if I do that, and I don't want to call it, to me, yes, it kind of felt like a sacrifice at the beginning, because I'm like, oh my God, I love to travel. I want to do this stuff. But then it's like, okay, but next year I can probably do 4 trips. Or so it's all in, I guess, the perspective, the mindset, and then not worried about what other people are thinking or saying, because I think that goes back to my clients, my couples. They're like, but we want to just get married. Great. That's fantastic. You don't have to do it in 3 months. You don't have to do it in 6 months. You don't have to do it. You do it when it's good for you both.
Yes.
Not when mom and dad want it, not because your maid of honor is like, oh, I want to, you know, go on a bachelorette party this year. It is. It's like the pressure of everything else. And of course, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, you know, maybe your other friend's getting married too. So these are all real life instances that I see, situations that I see all the time. Like, you have to do what's best for you both. Because at the end of the day, you two are getting married. And this is, again, the beginning of the rest of your life.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. So I was thinking of like some basic money things that might help start just the money conversation versus this whole like visioning process. And some things I thought that would be really helpful to your clients would be, number one, to just start tracking their spending. And so I don't, people always ask me for an app, and there are so many like free apps that you can find that will help you track your spending. But honestly, what you can do even is just put it all on one card. So of course, I'm not going to suggest you put it all on one credit card. I'm going to suggest you put it on like your checking account card, whatever that is. And so for a week, you put everything on one card so that you can look, you can go back and look at your online statement and just see everything you spent on. Another way is literally to just write it on paper. I feel like this generation is actually coming back to paper, and I love paper and pen. There's something about it. Yeah. It just feels so good. So even it's just like when you're tracking your weight or you're tracking your food, that kind of thing. It's similar situation. It's really all about awareness. So you want to know where your money's going. And these days you don't ever use cash. And so you don't really know where your money's going. You don't know how much you have. You don't know where it went. And so tracking it for at least like a week, a full month would be amazing, because then you'd have a whole month's worth of data on like how much you spend in a month. And that would be really helpful information. And that would include like your bills. So you can track all your spending, and then you can also create like a bills spreadsheet. So the other thing that's so common these days is we all have these subscriptions, right?
I was about to say Amazon and subscriptions. It's just automatically coming out of an account.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so while that's okay, and I use a lot of those too, but like my husband and I have our budget, right? So we see every month, when we do our budget meetings, we're like, okay, we still have this subscription. Are we using it? Is that useful to us? And so creating a list of all of your bills and all of your subscriptions and all of your debts even, it might feel overwhelming, but I honestly believe if you can be straight up with each other in the beginning and just be like, all right, here's my paper, show me your paper, like that is going to create such an amazing foundation for your marriage. Because the truth is, like, I would say like engagement is honestly the easiest it's going to get, right? Like my husband and I have been married for 18 years, and I love him more than I ever even thought possible at this point. But that's after a lot of work and a lot of discussions and marriage therapy and all kinds of hard things. And so to start your engagement with a really hard thing, I think is amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. It's gonna test the waters. And I also think it's also gonna help couples, because this happens, and I've had a couple of podcasts where we talked about it, where sometimes it's not the right fit. And sometimes you realize during the engagement that you're not the people who you want to be with each other later on down the road. And it's okay to break off an engagement, but it's harder to break off a marriage, and it's harder to break off a marriage if you have children. And I know that coming from personal experience. So I want to kind of help couples prevent that, because they're not talking about the future. They're talking about the right now. Yeah. So a lot of things that you said that I kind of want to go back. Okay. Well, obviously the tracking I think is super important, because there's so many things that we're doing that are coming out of cards that we're not seeing. We know it's there. We're not seeing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, Amazon, online shopping, and then there's the bills, and then there's what we're spending to go out. So if that's just dinners or concerts or movies. So there's so many different areas that we can track and put it all in one. Then we share that with one another. I think that's fantastic, because that number it's not imaginary. It's there. And just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Right. And the other thing you said is budget meetings. So that's something that my husband and I have been trying to do more of, because I think that if you don't talk about it for 2, 3, 4 months, and then it's like this conversation that you have to talk, and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. But if you're doing it every month, 2 things can happen. One, you're starting to realize, okay, we're definitely overspending and we can cut here. Or 2, if you're getting closer to that vision or to that goal, you can celebrate that and say, oh my God, we're getting, it almost builds the excitement and the anticipation to get you to the next. Yeah. And then I also think it helps couples realize it's not that hard. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, that's so true. And honestly, I will say, so my husband and I have all tried all kinds of iterations of budget meetings, and we've gotten to the point where we do it weekly.
Oh my goodness.
Mostly because it makes it so much quicker and easier.
Okay.
If we wait longer, what happens is stuff piles up, and it's like, oh, we have to like go back and reconcile that account, and what happened, it's not lining up, and it's really confusing. And numbers, it's math, right? And so it can get kind of out of whack, and it gets frustrating. Money, that's probably what gets the most frustrating, is like when budget doesn't line up with your checking account or with your credit cards or whatever you're trying to reconcile it with. And so we found if we do it weekly, we keep up with it way easier. We just use an online budgeting software that links with all of our banks and stuff. So it's already importing stuff and doing the transactions. So we just have to go through and make sure it's right, it's correct. And if we do that weekly, we do that. It takes 10 minutes maybe. It's so fast.
And time is valuable. We know.
And time is really valuable. And then we just have a discussion like, are there any big purchases coming up? Like, what do we have to talk about? Like for us at this point in our marriage, it's usually like kids stuff. So like right now we have to be talking about like summer camps and like, how are we budgeting for that? Are we on target to be paying for all of those summer camps and stuff like that for the kids? So you can have these conversations and they're quick and they're painless, and it's not an argument. Your engaged people might not have gotten there yet, but once you get married, that's basically what will happen. If you don't talk about money for a really long time, it will become just an argument every time you talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you're pushing it off to where it's just, nothing happens. And it's just, again, it's just a revolving door of stress and frustration, which again leads into, a relationship that you don't want to be in.
Yes.
And I also think that it's important to do before you get married, because even if you are planning a wedding, even for couples who aren't engaged yet and they're thinking about getting engaged, there's other things that they have to think about. So what if it is, we do have to get a new car next year, or, we do. So there's so many little things that add up, or we do have a friend's wedding and we want to go to it and we want to also make it our vacation.
Yes.
Or I would love to, pay off my student loans, because I think that's important for us before we get married. But then it also helps with the full, for most couples that do plan a year, an engagement or a wedding in a year, there's different deposits, different bills, different vendors that come into that mix. So it's going to be easier for you to talk to your partner about, hey, you know what, we're going to do our food and catering, our catering and bar package, and we're going to have to put, 50% of the deposit now, and we can pay the rest off in the next 5 months. And then in those 5 months, then we can start paying our floral bill, so it does fit, I think, into any chapter of someone's life. Yeah. And so why not make it now? Because it's going to be a lot easier for the client or for the couples later on. And it'll just be part of your routine.
Yeah. And I will say I'm kind of one of those people, and I might be kind of old school, but I wouldn't advocate necessarily that they have like joining accounts, because just like you said, people break off engagements and there's no protection for you legally in our society. If you join an account and you break it and you break your engagement, there's no protection for you. So what I would tell people is to actually create a budget, and then you could pool money, right? Like you could decide, okay, I'm going to do 50%, he's going to do 50%, or whoever, your partner's going to do 50%. And you just do it that way, right? Or you say, so you don't have to necessarily have a joint account.
You come up with a number.
Yes,
I think that's great. I don't have a joint account with my husband. So for me, it's splitting up, divvying up, whatever works best for that relationship. But it's important to still establish that.
Yes, for sure. I do think this is a really easy way to practice, right? Yeah. Is to create a budget just for your wedding day, just for the wedding, or, all that the wedding entails. So all of the days,
right?
There's a lot of days that a wedding entails.
All of the events leading up to it, if you decide to have them, and if you don't decide to have them, then it's just the wedding. Yeah. And you can just get an account that's for your wedding, and then you pull from those accounts. And then that's, something that maybe we want to do that for vacationing later on, or maybe we want to do that for our dream house fund. So it's not like you said, it's not saying merge your accounts. I think that can be hard for some people, and for others it can be easier. But it starts with the exercises. It starts with the conversations.
Yes,
And it starts
exactly.
with knowing the actual number. Because again, that's not going to change because you don't talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah. Awareness is so key to this process with anything, right? With any goal you're trying to achieve, you have to know where you are in order to know how to move forward, right? So whether it's a health goal or money goal, it doesn't matter, but you have to be honest with yourself on where you are right now. And the only way to do that is to actually look at the numbers. And honestly, it's gonna be hard in the beginning. It really is. It might be stressful. It might be frustrating to see those numbers, but the awareness is it's really going to be the thing that like pushes you forward in the long run.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you have a podcast, and I want my listeners to really listen to your podcast as well. I think there's a lot of episodes, especially the one that you just did recently with your kids' kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
And I will definitely want to put something together what you think would be good, like maybe the top 5 episodes of your podcast that would be great for
Okay.
newly engaged couples.
Okay.
What is a tool that I know you are going to do a fun freebie for our listeners, but can you kind of go through your tool that you give away a little more detail so that we can have that available in the show notes, and then we'll also do a social media post so that they can get that.
Yes. So I have multiple freebies that I do right now. I do have one that is actually like a video email challenge. It's a 5-day challenge, and it's like how to pay off debt, basically. So if that's where they're at and they really want to get rid of some debt so that they can go all in on their wedding day or go all in on a honeymoon fund, whatever they want to do, that is available. And it's really amazing. So I email you. It's just 5 days, and it walks you through my whole process. It's basically a mini version of the process. It has videos for each day. So it's kind of like a little 10-minute teaching. And then it kind of tells you what kind of work to do that day. And it even walks you through how to create a budget using the software that I use, which is an online software. So that one's available, and that one's really awesome. But I'll create one for y'all that's just about like visioning for your wedding day.
I think that'd be great, especially like we said, smaller, 1 to 3 years, and then like just have the end game, having the vision, having the goal, and not getting wrapped up in everything else, because there's, again, the choices that we make. We're not going to say sacrifices. The choices that we make today are going to really impact not only the wedding day, but the next 1 to 3 years.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And what is the best way that you would, what do you prefer? Do you on Instagram, your website that for couples and listeners to reach out to you?
I have my website, which is greatestworth.com. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook really all the time. So either of those is fine. And I get DMs through both of those. And those are both at Greatest Worth. And then I do have a Facebook group, which is free, and that's available. And that's really, it's turned into this really cool community it's mostly women, where we just kind of chat about what we're doing, like kind of our goals, how we're accomplishing them. And I do live videos in there every Monday night. It's usually on a topic, and I'll kind of teach on that topic, and that's completely free, but you do have to be part of that group in order to get those videos. Yeah.
I think that's great. So I talk about education, getting as much free education as you can. This is definitely a topic in my ebook that I think is extremely important for all couples. So there's so much that brides mainly, but brides and grooms have available to them when it comes to planning a wedding, but it's not educational. It's just going to be, where to buy certain things, where to spend the money, but yet not so much how to save the money. We've had some great wedding experts that do have podcasts and do have groups, but I think this is different because, again, it's not just for the wedding. It's going to be for the rest of their lives. So I think it's great to have a group of women that a bride or a groom can come and just go back and look at topics, because those can be topics that they're wanting to talk about now. And then I do have a lot of couples that are getting married for the second time. They're blending marriages. That was me 5 years ago. And so I am very happy that I was able to meet you. And I'm so glad that my listeners are able to have another source, because you and I talked about this, having the labels like a financial advisor or a marriage counselor or a therapist can be overwhelming for a newly engaged couple. Mm-hmm. So I just think having experts in those fields and actual people working with real people is going to help connect the dots for them early on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you letting me be here. I feel like I've learned a lot just even about, your audience. So I really appreciate it. It's really fun.
Thank you. And I would love to have you and Katie on later on this year too.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think, we can roll around in 6 months and see what couples are loving, what else they want to hear about, because I think this is going to open the door for other discussions, and then go from there, because I would love to meet Katie as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Giovanna.
You're very welcome. So I'll link everything in the show notes. Everything will be at The Greatest Worth, but everyone can click on links, and then we'll get them to your private Facebook group as well. So thank you for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.